Good evening, everybody, here from Finland, and we're sort of on the late night schedule here, and I imagine, of course, it's different for so many of you. But thank you for being here, and we're continuing with our work on the Series 3, and it's identify as being. I'm not sure this is program number 12 exactly. I think it might be, I don't know, program number 9 or something. I think I may have misrepresented it. But anyway, we'll get that straightened out, and don't worry. Here is the invitation, which I hope you have received, regarding our work together for the festival week of the new group of world servers here in Finland, actually, in person, if you can, from the 21st to the 28th of December. People are arriving pretty well on the 20th, and either departing on the 29th or staying for our New Year's vigil, which is sort of 24 hours of welcoming in the different time zones into the new year. Well, that's some goat, isn't it? Wow, that's amazing. And, we have a letter to you here, and nobody really knows yet the phrase of the way to draw the Capricorn. Well, the master knows, of course. Let's see, I'll try to get back here. But here's at least one of the versions of the Capricorn glyph, and some quotations from Master DK about the festival week, and some additional information, so that if you haven't received this for some reason, please let me know at infinitize8@gmail.com, infinitize with the number 8@gmail.com, and this is our kind of our program starting from the 21st of December. And it's chock full of study, meditation, and service, ceremonial services. So there's plenty to keep us thinking and working together. And of course, we, as always, reserve the right to change. Some of this will be on, what can I say? It'll be on broadcasts. So basically, you are the listener. But others will be webinars, and you'll have a chance to contribute your thought either verbally or in written form. And of course, if you're present with us, and we really can't take too many people, really, because of our setup, but we haven't quite reached our limit yet, and we'd be very happy to have you join us for this. Now, let's see. Next. Next is the huge chart of Parabrahm, huh? Well, some of it is correct, and some of it I don't think is correct, but I don't think I need to get into that too much. Let's just say that Ananda is bliss and not intelligence, and Chit is intelligence and not bliss. And there are a number of maybe little corrections to be made. Shiva belongs at the very top, and Brahma at the bottom, and Father, Son, and Holy Ghost is correct. Anyway, we live in apparently a 10-dimensional universe. I don't know whether that's always the case, because I suppose universes can vary according to the free selection of the absolute deity as to how to become a universe. So, but let's just say 10 is a good number. It's in a way, a kind of perfect number. And we have a zodiac not only of 12, we have a zodiac of 10, consisting of other kinds of constellations. So does this give us the full 10-ness of the universe? I would say no, it does not. And we come really, I think, nowhere close to that. Here is another map, I think well presented here by Tuya, colored in properly, I would say. And does that represent all 10 dimensions of the universe? No, it does not. It just represents the physical super cosmic plane. And 6 more are above that, unless we consider that there's always 3 hiding wherever 7 manifests, just the way in the tree of life from the Kabbalah we have 3 Kether, Chokhmah, and Bina above the line, and 7 in a more manifested condition. So I guess the point is we live always in a very complex universe, very complex. We haven't really, at this moment in our encapsulation and the limitation of our consciousness, we do not have even the remotest idea how complex it is, except if we also have consciousness simultaneously on higher planes. And it's always a question of an emanation going forth from its original identity into a state of encapsulation or limitation and rediscovering its true origin on the way of return. It is a kind of experience no one really knows what the encapsulated emanation will choose, but the destination, at least, is certain, and there's no way, at least as I conceive it, for any emanation to be left out of the final absorption back into the universal logos and on into the great pralaya. And, although it's impossible to think in these terms with real accuracy, we've been through this always more times than anyone can count. If we go back 1 trillion universes, it still applies. We've been through this more times than anyone can count and will be. So this is the mystery of infinity, and it's the mystery of our identity. If people care to go that far or that deep into what seems to contradict what the senses reveal about our identity. So we're kind of coming at this in a way that turns our normal perceptions on their head and allows us to get a completely different view, if we can, of what real identity is. Well, okay, it's nice to see you all here, and I want to welcome you, Anna and Annette and Karsten and Catherine and Francois and Heike and Helene and Joan and Julia and Karen, Leah, Leslie, Loretta, Mariut, Maribel, Michael, Myrna, Raz, Stephen, a couple of Stevens here, Stephen Renneberg and Stephen Sprung, welcome, and Tia and Tuya. I'll put you over here on the other side, Tuya, and Veronica, and then supporting our efforts, we have Joe, and Tuya will be on the other side too, and so will I, if all goes according to plan. Okay, I have a plan for tonight. I never know quite what I'm going to plan because there's no real linearity to all of this. As a matter of fact, in the realm of reality, we might say that which is linear doesn't exist at all. Now think about that for a minute, because we talk about this linear sequence of universes that goes on forever, and it seems to exist, but let's just say it's the highest form of illusion, or pretty close to the highest form of illusion. And in fact, ultimately, we cannot say that the dimension of time or the dimensions of space, which would be necessitated to create linearity, actually do exist. We can reduce all things to points, and points are dimensionless. That's worth exploring, both in terms of time and in terms of space. And there may be other means of exploring the dimensionlessness of the point. And at the same time, we find that reality is pointless, and that space and time do not exist within the ultimately, utterly real. I mean, we say a lot of things are real, We see something with our senses, and we register something. We say, well, that's real. It's real in a way, but it's not really real. And because whatever perception appears to our perceptual mechanism, it turns out to be actually a point which is dimensionless in terms of time and space, and which is actually a necessary illusion. Last night, I think we were working with Francis, and he was going through the work of some German philosophers from the 19th century, and there was one philosopher, was it von Schelling, who said that, I'm going to paraphrase, that the infinite had this requirement or habit of becoming finite. I mean, he was getting pretty close to the great breath there. And anything that is finite is an illusion. So now, the kinds of illusions that we are subject to are of a much lower grade, and DK goes over them maybe in a Glamour World Problem, and 7 different kinds of illusions which keep a person from functioning in a really useful way. And those are illusions too. But I'm getting to the philosophical idea that any entire universe is a finitude. It's not infinite. No universe is infinite, otherwise it couldn't be sequential. It could not have a duration. The great breath would not apply. And I am assuming with the stanzas of Jian and their great antiquity, that this great breath is a very high form of illusion, almost a reality. So no great breath, really, if we talk about utter reality. But if we go just a step or two below that utter reality, then we have the foremost example of the cosmic clock, the great breath. It is the actual expression of this law of the great one, the greatest one. It's an expression of the law of periodicity, which is the second fundamental of the secret doctrine. And then the third fundamental, we'll be dealing with that when we talk about cosmic fire wait a second. Yes, Friday night. that all souls, meaning and all perceptions and all acts of consciousness are identical with the oversoul. So there's no way to escape from the one great consciousness. There's no way to escape from the one great being forever, and there's no termination of your existence or mine, and we will find it merely to be, at first, the existence of a universal logos taken, in an illusory, periodical manner, and then if we reduce that periodicity to the first fundamental of the secret doctrine, we will find there is no periodicity at all. And as some have said, and the universe never arose. Well, maybe not in reality, but certainly forever in terms of cyclic actuality. I'm using a few words over and over again because they mean something to me, and maybe they will mean something to you also. And I think they encapsulate a view of that which normally we would not take into our consciousness, or if we did, we'd do so in a superficial manner, and we wouldn't carry out the thought to the logical conclusion, even though there are some huge paradoxes that are operative in this question of what is real, what is illusory, what is actual, and how things arose in the first place. I guess suffice it to say, I just want to say, that although it seems to contradict our usual sense of causality, like everything has its cause, which is, and the causes have been analyzed, by Aristotle and others, that we're dealing with something here called, or that we can call, the causeless cause. The causeless cause. It has no cause in itself. It always was, always will be. It is the bedrock of reality, and it has no antecedent, and it has no precedent. Nothing. Let me just say, nothing other than itself follows it, and hence linear time is eliminated, and nothing else preceded it. It's just the absolute. And being tiny little human beings as we are, we're not in any position to say that our estimation of what the absolute is equal to that of a planetary logos or a solar logos or a greater God, and on and on and on. No, not by any means. And yet, I am convinced at the moment of my present ignorance that the conception of the absolute or the absoluteness as conceived by the greatest God of the universe, the universal logos, is by itself inadequate and cannot encompass the nature of the absolute or of the absolute deity, which mysteriously, as the actor, arises from the absolute or the absoluteness. Now, that's a big statement. What I'm saying is that what we usually say God has finite perception. Its only complete perception is of itself in universe. But other than that, when we talk about the after pralaya, if we can talk about that, after pralaya, something entirely different than what it could conceive when it was a finite, universal God appears. And I'm also saying that all that can be perceived of absoluteness is a reflection of it, and that the absolute per se, I know you're not supposed to talk about the absolute, that maybe in the old days they put you to death for doing it. The absolute does not need any principle. It does not need perception of any kind. It has no division of any kind. And all it can do is be. Now, we talk about doobie-doobie-doo, there's doing and there's being and doing, and in between is loving. But all it can do is to be. And it is exactly what it is, the no thing, not preceded, not followed, forever existent, absolutely immutable, unchangeable, and containing all of absolute infinity. All right, well, that's my little pep talk here for the for the beginning of this work we do together. And I know that the concepts sound strange, and at first all they are is concepts and speculations. But we have to cross a bridge, the result of which is to transform concepts into infuceptions, or into perceptions, into experiences or imperiences. I use that word. We have to get the feeling of it, which is different from the thought of it. And so this means that at the very least, we have to begin to cultivate a Buddhic consciousness, a Buddhic awareness beyond the awareness of the abstract mind. Now, if you stick with this kind of study, your abstract mind will get a good workout, no question about it. And you may wonder whether you were ever using the abstract mind before, or just some kind of complex expression of the concrete mind. But that's not enough. What we have to do is enter the Buddhic realm here, on the fourth sublevel of which lies the intuition, and we have to enter Atma, and very importantly, the monadic realm. I'm not saying we're going to do that in this life, okay? But some little flash may occur, and then the realm of the sea of fire, and that's just the beginning. Now, once we are a liberated monad, excuse me, we will be choosing one of 9 paths, which are cosmic paths. And we will discover that we will be liberated as a unit of being consciousness into the cosmic astral plane, the cosmic mental plane in some cases. I mean, it's just words, but okay. And then eventually, for one of the paths at least, and maybe for more, the cosmic Buddhic plane. If our destiny is to become, along with many others, a solar god, then we will find ourselves eventually destined to take up our position and our registration upon the cosmic Buddhic plane. Meanwhile, all of this gives us the incentive to struggle forward beyond our present limitations and to look at mankind's present anticipation of the after-death state as a childish anticipation. Maybe it's the best people could do, and I'm sure we have all believed many things which were not true. But with the presence of the ageless wisdom given to us through great sacrifice from Master Moria, Master KH, and Master DK, and approved by the Christ and by Sanat Kumara, we have a presentation which is was never the last word, okay, but it's far beyond anything that humanity, at least recently and normally, has been presented with, except in the initiatic schools. In the initiatic schools, okay, there was always something closer to the truth, but that was not for the general public. And lo and behold, this has now been released in book form for the general public. So it's a tremendous step, and it has to be assimilated. Okay. Now, what I want to do is get into a little kind of meditation for you tonight, in which you'll come up with your own stuff. And okay, so, and by the way, here's the links. I don't know how I do this or not, but maybe I've already done it.
Why don't you copy them and put them in the chat box?
I think I did one of them that way. Let's see, 4115, yeah. 4115, that ending there in the chat box, that's for esoteric science of triangles.
I'm not seeing that in the chat box.
Really? Okay, it's definitely there. But what the heck, you know, I'll just send it again to everybody. And the next one is a treatise on cosmic fire, which is for Friday night. And I'm going to send that to you. And then you can copy that. Whoops, that went fast. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, now everything should be in the chat box, I hope.
Yes, it is.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, you know, the ageless wisdom can be approached in many ways. And according to your ray, according to the development that you've gone through, according to the signs of the zodiac and the planetary placements, which are current in your ray chart and in your in your astrological chart, so will be your particular approach to the great sphere of knowledge which the ageless wisdom represents. But all roads lead to Rome, you know, and no matter where you start, the whole of it, the omniscience of it, the complete inclusion of all items of knowledge will be yours eventually. Now, Master DK himself, as learned as he is still very far from that kind of understanding. He says, look, I know about the cosmic astral plane, but I haven't been there, so I don't know firsthand. And, you know, how long does the universe last? Well, we cannot trust the normal scientific figures at all, because they do not take into consideration the additional dimensions of cosmos and its incredible complexity and at the same time simplicity. So we just have a lot to learn yet. And if we proceed wisely on our following our rays and following what the zodiac and the planets give to us, we will achieve. Now, you know, in chapter 10 of the rays and initiations, it talks about the tears or the rents within the veils of Maya. Now, maybe the Christ, I think he made the biggest rent, from the top to the bottom. The veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. Moses, the lawgiver, created a rent, maybe more along the third ray line, interestingly. And St. Paul, the former Master Hilarion, gave a rent, a smaller one, along the first ray line and revealed something of the factor of synthesis. And now that's what we're applying ourselves to right now. It doesn't mean we know everything in the other areas. We don't. But somehow this dawning realization of synthesis, a word that's easy to, we pronounce it and all that, but what does it really mean? This dawning realization of what synthesis is should begin to be ours. So in a way, although the first ray and the fifth ray are very strongly related, because fifth ray souls tend to resolve themselves onto the first ray. All of the rays of attribute, 4, 5, 6, 7, have to somehow find their way onto the rays of attribute. Am I correct there? Attribute? Wait a second. Aspect. The rays of aspect, 1, 2, and 3. So from attribute to aspect, and the first ray, just like the Pythagorean tetractys, 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, the fifth point is right below the first point. Just draw out the bowling pins for yourself, and you'll see that triangle with 4 lines of 1, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the fifth point has an immediate relation to the first point, just as first ray has that kind of relation to the fifth ray. And yet they approach in different ways, and so we're not into so much analysis, although if analysis can serve the factor of synthesis, that's all well and good. Okay, but ours is the search for synthesis. Now, we have some questions here, and I'm just going to ask you these questions, and then we're going to go into kind of a reflection, a meditation, and, have something handy you can write with or type with or whatever. So if a thought comes to your mind that is of value, you can make note of it. So we're going to ask ourselves, how do you extract pervasiveness value, identicality value from any perception? I know, almost every perception is different from every other. In fact, I would say that according to the principle of unrepeatability, which I think is connected with the senses, senses on all levels, there's a certain unrepeatability quality in that which the senses deliver to the consciousness, a certain unrepeatability. Now, but there's also this something, which in a way is a reflection of the essence. It's a reflection of the no thing, not nothing, but the no thing. And the question is, what is our particular open sesame? Have we discovered our own particular individual open sesame? The word, the phrase, the perception, the thought, whatever it is, that opens the door to us to the realms of infuception, to the realms of pervasiveness, to the realms of identicality, formlessness, all those states which are so simple that we're trying to achieve them and oftentimes fail. I guess, I'm failing all the time when I sometimes try to do this, and I just I just persist until I get it, or at least I get hold of the tail, and then I can be brought into a low level of this kind of perception. So, to make it simple, how do you, the inquirer, the person seeking to return to reality, or as much of the essence as possible, how do you enter the state of infuception? I've given some suggestions, but the suggestions are only mine. And I want to, let's see if I can get this together. Okay. So I'm asking you, what are your magical words? What are your magical phrases? What is your magical method? Now, having a lot of third ray in my makeup, I tend to go for magical words and magical phrases. And I've listed a few of them here. Sometimes I think the poet, the English poet laureate, Alfred Lord Tennyson, he was a mystic. He was a DK. He said he was strongly on the sixth ray, meaning he was a Leo actually, and so he had a lot of Neptune as the second ruler of Leo, and he was interested in mysticism and in the mystical state, and he found, if I get this right, that by repeating his name to himself, was it Tennyson, was it Alfred, I don't know, but repeating his name to himself, he could induce a quasi-hypnotic state which allowed him, I would say, to become more the soul than the personality, more the real identity rather than the false identity. He had his own method. And what I'm hinting at here is that every one of us should develop our own method. It doesn't have to be my method. I'm still working around to figure out what the best method for myself might be, and on different days it may be different. But here are some of these magical words that I consider them magical, or words that are capable of inducing in some people the infuceptional state. It's not the normal perceptual state, which is filled with all kinds of difference between things. It's the infuceptional state, and that is filled with, sameness. So when I say sameness, you can use different parts of speech, whatever works for you. Invented words, samify, samifying, identical, identicality, pervade, pervading, pervasiveness, seamlessness, Seams, when you sew something, the seam is usually appearing. It's where two things are joined together. Well, that's a boundary, but in this, in that which infuception reveals, there are no boundaries, except maybe, the boundary between a universe and its ring pass knot and the supra-universal state. But that's, such a huge boundary that we can't even worry about that right now, and it will disappear. Seamlessness, essential, essentialize, essentializing, or whatever other part of speech you can find, and just formlessness. Well, you have to wonder whether there's ever such a thing as formlessness, because, when we say on the lower three cosmic subplanes we have form, but on the other higher cosmic subplanes we don't. It's formless. But is that really true? And maybe it's not true. Maybe the forms here on the cosmic ethers are not so dense and, not so bounded, but they are energy forms. And you kind of wonder whether any universe is a form in such a way that, however subtle it is, it's still a form compared to no thing, the no thing. And I guess one of the points I really want to make is the no thing is not nothing. The no thing is not nothing. Spinoza, he just didn't allow negation in the dealing with the definition of God. If we turn to his ethics, the 6 definitions at the beginning of the ethics set that out pretty clearly. So this is the realm of, it's not the final realm of no number, but let's just say when dealing with all the contents of the universe and the way we could number them, it is virtually no number, because there just are no really different things. Now we know that the absoluteness is really the ultimate utter realm of no number, and the universe is the realm of number. And even the absolute deity, just a little bit short of absoluteness, is a realm of absolutely infinite number. So we'd have to leave that to the mathematicians. They have their way of dealing with infinite numbers. But the thing is, they've never, I don't think they've broken out of the limitation which number represents. So some little hint at the absolute zero or no number, that might do it for you, boundlessness, boundarylessness. When you think about that, it's an amazing concept, because basically it means there is no space. And you can't even have the duration of a moment. There is no time. But we'll have some meditations on timelessness and spacelessness, and we'll see to what extent that can be meaningful to us. The homogeneous, the homogeneity, it's another way of saying that there's no articulation. There's no splitting up. Perception splits things because it's based on a limited perceiver. Now think about that. And a completely unlimited perceiver does not need to divide everything up into parts and pieces. So we are all limited perceivers, and even the God of a particular universe is a limited perceiver. The only unlimited perceiver is, to my way of thinking at this time, I have to qualify it always, is the absolute deity who is functioning fully in the post-pralaic world and the pre-universal world. There is an interval, Madame Blavatsky tells us from the stanzas of Jian, there is an interval between universes. And I call that the supra-universal world. I call it the post-pralaic world. I call it the pre-universal world. Whatever, it's not so much a question of what is right when we're dealing with words like this. They're all right. It's a question of what it does to your consciousness, to the extension of your perception, to your ability to infuse. That's what it's a question of. Then, the Tibetan statement, naught is but me, is a great second-ray mantram. I have also suggested, to perceive. I just lump it all together under the word see, to see, to open your heart center imaginatively, and to invite in, and it can occur and will occur at times, the sudden sameness of two or more apparently different forms, or the sudden sameness of you as the perceiver and that which is perceived. And we call this contemplation. The stages of meditation: concentration, meditation, contemplation. That's the beginning of what I'm talking about. Then illumination, inspiration, initiation, and so forth. Every one of them zodiacally connected. And then your own word or your own phrase. This is what I use so far. Maybe there's some other words I use. I don't know. Other phrases, maybe. But I just thought I'd assemble a few of these and see what I came up with. And but maybe, and probably, if your own infuception-inducing word or phrase is not listed here, it's the most important for you. So that's what we have to determine. Just the way I've tried to do this over years, carrying my little notebooks with me, and scribbling these things when the idea hits. Maybe you'll want to do something similar if you want to touch, even a little bit, the ground of all being. It's from Paul Tillich, the theologian. The ground of all being, or the fundamental from which all things arise. Okay, so now we're going to have a little. I'm going to leave these words up. Okay, I'm going to leave these words up, and we'll have a little reflection on, are there any words here that really do something for you in terms of getting the bringing something that is non-divisible, something that is one, bringing something that is one into consciousness. Okay? So, little reflection now, little meditation. I guess we begin by realizing, which is a little against how we normally think, that all the variety around us is useful on its own level, but there's a higher level where some kind of a oneness can be achieved. And I call this infuception. Different from normal perception. It emphasizes really the subtle, extremely subtle, something which became all the variety, and which essentially is what you are. Now, that something, or the reflection of the no thing, is so subtle that sometimes, or most times even for most people, it's covered over by the sense of everything's different from everything else. Even if, you have two different kinds of, you have two automobiles that are made by the same maker, and they're the same model and all the rest, there's going to be subtle differences. And certainly you can find huge differences in what you perceive. This and that, sometimes a huge gulf between this and that. And we live in a world of difference and change and movement, Heraclitus, the philosopher, nothing is constant but change. Well, I would say that's correct in the world of illusion, but probably not in the world of reality. Then you get into Parmenides and his disciples in the pre-Socratic period, and he's looking for that which does not move and that which is forever the same. So what you want is some additional perception of otherness. You want to be able to look at two things, or two states, or two places, like the game 20 questions. Is it a person, place, or thing? It doesn't make any difference. As long as it's something, you want to be able to take it, excuse me, and see it as the same as yourself. You want to be able to infuse anything you see, anything you register. You want to eliminate its differentness. So I'm just going to sort of turn you loose here to reflect for some moments on the list that I have proposed, if you wish, or on your own words, or phrases, or whatever does it for you, you know. And see if some infuception can arise that takes you beyond the normal perception, which is just filled with every manner of difference. It's not that we get rid of perception, but we see it within an infuceptional framework. It's all different, but it's all the same. So let's have some quiet time thinking about what, if anything, here works for you and or promises to work for you, or something of your own that works for you. So we'll have some minutes of pondering this idea and this energy or this infuception. Well, I have to say, it's not enough time. But maybe time is a funny thing. Sometimes our language uses it all the time. Something can hit you immediately. And other times you have to work for it. I work for this every day. Even if just for a few seconds. And you have to test out your words of power. That's what these are in a way. DK talks about words of power. I assert the fact, I see the greatest light, all that. Words of power. Because behind the word, behind the concept of the word, is something which is much more real and is perceived in a different way. Now, when we start getting into the higher planes here, we're getting beyond the form of a planetary logos's dense physical body. All of this is pretty dense, and especially a solar logos's dense physical body. It includes the egoic lotus. And we're getting into formless forms, energy states, things that are perceivable, but they're not so delimitable. Can't really throw a boundary around them so easily. And what we start to really look for is that which just doesn't have boundaries, no matter what kind of form we're talking about. You could have a bunch of bricks that make up a wall. Every brick is distinct, and yet in this state of consciousness or perception, which I call infuception, that we're looking for, distinctness is not the name of the game. The distinction is overpowered by something else. And the question is how to not only be in touch and perceive that something else, but step number 2 here is to be that something else that overpowers difference, to be that which overpowers difference. Is there anybody that would like to say anything or write anything or share a word or why a word may have worked for you? You probably saw I threw a couple of other things in there going along, remembering that I had used them before. Each one of these words of power gives a slightly different entry point into the formless state. Now, we certainly have a lot to do in the world of form. We have a lot of things to take care of, and things are not going so well as we would hope on our planet. At this time, we're in a big transition phase in the world of illusion, and our planet is going through an initiation, and it's a painful one, and it's a fourth subsidiary initiation. But remember that at the fourth initiation, in general, kind of an unobstructed access to the monad takes place. You know, you begin to feel a little something there at the third degree, and it takes you to something that the monad can present. But when the causal body is destroyed, you have pretty well a better access to whatever it is the monad and triad are really perceiving, or what you, as a monad triad, can perceive. So, you know, this is not nihilism. You know, it's not just eliminating everything. What it is looking for the root of everything, while allowing everything to remain and learning all about it, but realizing that all these things that you're studying and that you're pursuing came out of you, out of me, all things, all this from me, capital M. Now that's, you know, the danger with this kind of thing is people can get kind of inflated, and they can start ignoring the world as it is, in which we have so much work to do. See, none of that is allowed. Your ego, lower ego, cannot grab onto these ideas. It's not allowed. And there's plenty of work to be done in the realm of fulfilling the archetypal plan for any particular universe. So we have to be both, in a way, limited and unlimited at the same time. Can we do that? You know, it's going to take some work. So if there's anybody that would like to share a word which for them works or helps, or to say anything about it, or to write anything about it, please just go ahead. You know how to do it, either with a question mark or raise your hand if you want to speak. And I'll just try to keep my eye on things. And if, there we go, from Heike. And, okay, pervades all, yet is utter stillness. Behind all movement is the stillness of the one. Okay, Raz, that's Raz. And that's, they may, you know, none of us is to say. I can feel and see what this means. But if you get something out of it, that's the most important. See, utter stillness is so interesting because everything that is divided is in movement. So you're looking at the indivisible. So behind all movement is the stillness of the one. It's only one thing, it's indivisible. The indivisible thing. Now, if you can, as Master Moria says, contain, that's the word he uses, if you can contain those two registrations at the same time, you're well on your way to the kinds of perception, infuception we want to have. Now, my audio. Okay, my audio connection was restored. I don't know what happened, but it got lost. But basically, if you can contain both, as Master Moria said, then okay. Then you're well on your way. Now, in every universe, we, as minutia, have to find the way back. And yet, we'll only discover that we haven't left home, as I've explained before, with the image of the original candle and the next two and the next three and the next four and so forth. The universal tetractys, the original candle doesn't go out, okay? Now, Heike here, my word would be the German equivalent to pervasiveness. It sounds more active than I would use it. Not in the way that I pervade the other, but like I and the other pervade each other, okay? Without doing, okay? Without doing it. Because it's already there. Pervasive fuse. Okay. Whatever, look, this is all about what is a word of power for you. So being a native English speaker, whatever, you'd find your word in German, whatever. And those German philosophers of the early 19th century, they really, they owned the realm of the air, as I said the other night, and as DK had said. And their rays are the same, though reversed, of India, and their soul ray, their soul sign, is the same as India. So a lot of the... I remember I read a book 50 years ago called The Wonder That Was India, but it was by a German by the name of Heinrich Zimmer, or Zimmermann, something like that. So he was obviously a reincarnated soul from the subcontinent, and he had a way of writing about it that was very evocative. So, look, this is a search. And I want to say that for myself, sometimes one word works and sometimes another, depending on the day. Sometimes a very alert state of consciousness works for me, and sometimes a rather, I don't know how to describe it, a demi-state between sleep and full awareness works for me. And Master Moria says, watch that demi-state, because a lot can come out of that, a lot of perceptions that you might not have otherwise. So all I can say to everybody, just keep working at it. You know what you're doing. I mean, yes, you have to study the Ageless Wisdom. Yes, I think the Moria Federation and its 5-year to 10-year program is a great way to do it. In terms of the curriculum for the preparatory schools of the future, we tried to come as close to that as we could, admitting, of course, that we're not looking up everybody's karmic record the way will happen when the master supervises and so forth. But at the same time that you're doing all this mental work, You have to perceive now, or infusive, with something other than the mind. I suppose, in a way, the heart, or the many hearts that we have, even the monad is a heart, those are the mechanisms of perception, and the mind can straighten things out, but it doesn't enter the promised land. It's the story of Moses, you know. Symbolically, in a way, Moses was the mind, and he could not enter the promised land. Good for him. He was spared that horrible karma. Okay, now, going on. Loretta, I like the word same, so much so that I wake up at night thinking about same. You know what? And I've described that, the same of the absoluteness and of the absolute deity in the supra-universal world. That's all caps. The same of the planetary logo, well, the universal logos, and all of the identicality of things within its inclusive embrace, and then things that just seem the same, lowercase. For practical purposes, we call them the same, but you can always find the variation according to the principle of unrepeatability. So I strive to, you say, to infusive same is everywhere, indeed, everything and every time. Yes, and take yourself back imaginatively a few universes ago, or 1,000 universes ago, in the illusory sequence, and you will find the same. You'll find only, ultimately, one collective point which never changes. And, well, maybe that's a question, because it can never include that point of an infinitude of elapsed universes, can never contain the entire content of absolute infinitude. That's a mathematical question and not worth going into right now. For the energy of same is the energy of all. And when we use all, it's all caps, yes. I know the abstract mind accepts this, but in dealing with the concrete mind, I falter, and indeed we do. To this effect, I have come upon an acronym that my concrete mind accepts, whilst I allow the abstract to delve in depth and samify. Same. And the acronym same. Acronym same. And the samification is the verb. It's the way that we have of looking at difference or registering difference and somehow making out of it or registering the fact that all of this difference, though actual, is really illusory and not real. So it's a way of looking at two things, and suddenly something comes in. And it usually, for me, it sinks down into the heart center. But I wouldn't exclude the heart within the head, and I wouldn't exclude the causal body and the egoic lotus, and I wouldn't exclude the spiritual triad, and of course the monad has to be, at least on the cosmic physical plane, the main thing. And finally, the liberated monad into the sea of fire, I suppose there, as far as the cosmic physical plane is concerned, And that's all of this, whatever is found in the sea of fire, that has the greatest sameness value. So Loretta's saying here, you would be trying again self-awareness in multiplictic extension. Woo! Okay, look, like I say, there is extension, apparently, in absolute infinitude, and at the same time, if we have boundlessness, there's no extension at all. So we're probably dealing ultimately with a reality in which there is no extension. The philosophers of the 17th century, they argued endlessly about extension. But it turns out to be simply a perceptual arising from a limited perceiver. Extension, the stretching out of thing after thing after thing, with intervals between them, and each thing being of a certain measurement, all of that is extension, and all of that is collapsible. You can collapse it all down to a point, and then you get rid of the point, and then you have the only real no thing. So, okay, so as Joan is saying here, both the particle and the wave, and you have different nuclear physicists opting sometimes for one or the other. I remember, I've got his face in front of me, Feynman, the scientist with a sense of humor. And he had a lot of Taurus and Scorpio and Sagittarius, and basically said, "Let me assure you, it's a particle," he said. And then you come into these things called particle waves. Well, this is going to be the fifth ray method of discovering, arriving at the same place. And not too many people take on the both and, but I think it's the resolution of a paradox and is allowed. Now, finally, in absoluteness, you have neither particle nor wave. All of that requires division, and you have none of it. And, we're so used to division. This is different from that, and this is separate and all that. Part of overcoming the great heresy of separateness is to realize the indivisibility, the essential indivisibility of absoluteness. Okay? So if you start dividing things up, you immediately know that we have somehow violated a higher reality of the absoluteness. There's just no differences. And the thing is, when there are differences, even if two things are tangent to each other, you're going to find entire infinitudes at the boundary of the tangent. So we just have to get rid of multiplicity in the ultimate state, but when we're aware of the self, as Loretta is saying here, in this hugely multiplistic world, that's fine, and we're aware that the multiplicity came out of one thing, which we are. Now, I'm not saying that the same level of infuception can always be reached. I'm not saying that at all. You know, you may have a good day, a bad day. Sometimes you go fishing, you catch fish, and sometimes you don't. But there, with practice, practice makes perfect, okay? We hear. With practice, multiplicity is overcome by the utmost simplicity. Is it worth getting into? I think so. Otherwise, we're missing the very foundation of all it is. It'd be like having, you know, in a way, I've talked about this, Sanskrit music or Sanskrit writing without the bar out of which all the letters descended. You'd have a bunch of letters, and that's what we've got now in English and other languages, but you don't have the bar. You've all seen those pictures of the Sanskrit writing, and every letter is hanging from that bar. That bar is the bar of the continuity of things, the continuity of being. And that bar is who we are. That bar is what we are, more really than anything that hangs from it. So, okay, Ra's pervasiveness, yeah, I certainly use that one a lot. You know, whatever allows that most subtle thing, or thinglessness, whatever, to land in your consciousness so that you say, aha, okay, there it is. That's step one. But realizing that you are it is step two. Very important. Very important. Because without that, there's still a duality. I'm here, and this all-pervasive thing is there, pervading everything except what I am. So we've got to get rid of duality. And when I say get rid of it, I don't mean in a practical life. We better hang on to it in a practical living. But when it comes to reality, duality doesn't really fit. But, you know, and this will require some thinking. You have to sit down with yourself and a little notebook or whatever and start taking down the thoughts that come to your mind. And who knows what's going to arrive as you start looking for what your higher power may see, because you are that higher power. What happens when you enter that? What is seen? What is registered? You have to discover that. We all do. Now here's Aunt Veronica saying seamless. Seamless. I felt with and without boundaries, couldn't breathe, and felt at the same time, felt openness, a breath of fresh air. Yeah, I think somehow, Aunt Veronica, you're catching the paradox of reality. You know, the both and-ness of this state for which we are seeking. But remember, as it says in these wonderful stanzas, which I think I've shown you before, but, you know, I can hardly ever resist it, if you'll allow me. Basically, it is said the seeker and his thought, the seeker and the sought are one. Well, let's see. Let's just stop there. The seeker and the sought. And here it is. I am the seeker and the sought. I rest. For every fervent six-ray type, this is a real, really important realization. I would really recommend, get the Alice Bailey CD-ROM and save yourself a lot of heartache. These 7 stanzas, the 7 keys to the 7-ray methods of doing what? Of discovering reality. Naught is but me. Here we have it. Second ray, and every one of them has a beautiful final sentence that sums it up. 7th ray, I love this. Let the builders cease their work. The temple is completed. Let the soul enter into his heritage, and from the holy work, from the holy place, command all work to end. Then in the silence subsequent, let him chant forth the word, the creative work is over, I, the creator, am, naught else remains but me. And if we can get to the point where we realize that naught else remains after all of this but me, in the big sense, what infuception reveals, then to our normal pursuit of the ageless wisdom, we have added something very, very precious, very, very precious, and without which I wonder if we can ever really penetrate the depths of the ageless wisdom. So for Andrea here, absoluteness, absolute inclusive. I think, the whole idea of inclusiveness, it's a big Jupiterian word. It's a big second ray word. And I think that to include will often reveal the unity. And it's a bridge to being that which is included. A bridge to being that which is included. See, we have to remember that this whole subject is beyond good and evil. Every perception, you look at a wicked person. There were lots of wicked people. Maybe we've all gone through our phases of wickedness, it's hard to say. But they are still the ultimate reality. They have simply chosen to create in a way that is ignorant of the universal archetype, and that's what makes them wicked. But sometimes I purposefully visualize people I wouldn't want to have much to do with until that thing drops in. And overpowers their deviation from what is the good. Are they forever responsible for what they've done? Well, I think it's all solved within the boundary of a universe. But what this means is that the universal logos, in extension, through emanation, and through ignorance. It's just like the universal logos ties one hand behind its back. It's like God is not God unless he, it, she creates the stone that God cannot lift. So who becomes wicked? Who becomes good? The great universal deity becomes both good and evil while being neither of them. The good is the perfect, is that which accords with the archetype of any universe, and evil deviates from that. But the creator or the becomer, even while remaining in the world of being, that's the tough part, in the world of being, and yet going forth, becomes both good and evil. And we've been through it many, many times. And whose responsibility is it? It's our responsibility. If there's anyone good anywhere in the whole universe, it will be proven to be us. If there's anyone evil in the whole universe, it will be proven to be us. And hence the apparent paradox. But, you don't, you're an emanation now. You have a name, you have a place, you have a planet, and all the rest. That's all going to be relatively forgotten. The only thing that counts is that you are the universal logos. And in being the universal logos, you are the absolute deity. And in being the absolute deity, you are the absolute. Well, like I say, some people are going to find this really difficult. And I do too at times. But something inside, the spirit inside, demands the solution. So absolute inclusiveness. I'll take care of the written ones here first, and I know there's one or two people that want to say something. Timelessness, not much of a word I know. Well, whatever. Hey, Michael, whatever works. Neptune's treacle, I love it. Okay, I thought of visualizing a nice blue Neptune in the middle of all this process, because there's something about that super blue planet, which is what we're really talking about here. It is Christ. Neptune is the Christ in a way, and Neptune is the great pervader and the great negator of the ring past not. So, it's like looking for a magical formula which is going to work every time or most times, and it's a search. I'm reminded, you say, of a musician I once knew, a Gemini. He called himself... What did he call himself? I'm missing something here, darn it. What did he call himself? Michael. Because I can't read it.
Which one are you trying to read?
Michael Moultram. Michael. He called himself K. Just K? K? Is that it?
It says, how about Neptune's treacle?
Treacle.
And I am reminded of a musician I once knew, a Gemini. He called himself Karmic Outlaw.
Oh, okay, yeah. So those words were missing for me. Okay, well, don't make me laugh, or I'll never stop coughing here. Well, okay, if that does him some good, that's great. My old teacher used to say, and he said it with the sternest face he could muster, and it was pretty stern, being, I think he was a first-rate personality, second-rate soul. He said, and he looked right at me, he said, look, No one breaks the law breaks them. I just can't get that out of my mind as something that is true for me. But of course, there is humor, and humor is very good in suddenly changing your perception, and we need that quite a bit. So thanks for offering those thoughts, Michael. And Roz has, so would you say that these teachings are based on Hindu? Are we looking at Advaita? Because again, I just get A and a, why am I not succeeding in seeing any more words than I see? I don't know, but I saw something that looked like Advaita.
I have no idea. So would you say that these teachings are based on the Hindu Advaita?
Yeah, okay.
Advaita.
Yes, I would say so, yes. The Advaita teaching, yeah. Advaita teaching, I've always been partial to it, and the minute I discovered Shankaracharya, I realized, that this was my line, and that I had been privileged to meet an Advaita disciple early in my life at university, and it made all the difference. And it's the doctrine of non-dualism. So absolutely, yes, this is what this teaching is all about. Now, there are different kinds of Advaita Vedantists, and you're just going to find all this variety for sure. But you've got to work it out for yourself so that which always is and is non-dual appears before your registration. It just appears. And there's no way to kind of hold on to it. It just appears. But there are these triggers that I'm calling words of power that might help us get into it, and live non-dualistically even while living dualistically. This is kind of paradoxical, but okay. You got to live in this world of illusion, okay, forever, cyclically. But behind it all is something that puts it all together first. That's called unity. And then makes of it one thing only, and that's oneness. That's the Advaita Vedanta. And of course that comes from the Vedas, and it's basically the teaching of Shiva. It's basically the teaching of the soul of India with its Aries nature. Germans too, they have the soul, not the first ray. They have Aries and the fourth ray, but India has Aries and the first ray. And so, Aries is the first sign, and it makes out of all things one. And the early principle was that Aries and Pisces are one sign. So you can certainly have the sensitivity to the one when you have a lot of Pisces in your chart. But Aries can give it too, and in a different way. So yes, my friends, you're in kind of a course in Advaita here. And of course, I'm doing it my own way. I'm an Aries person. Okay, I'm doing it my own way. But if you can get anything out of it, and especially adding your own perspective into this, then you will have something quite precious. Okay, now, those are the ones that I saw question marks, and I saw a hand up here from Julia, and there you go. Julia, you can speak now.
Oh, thank you, Michael. I don't know why the hand was up. I don't have a question. I'm sorry.
Okay, it just went up on its own. Well, all I can say is that we are the answer to the question we've been asking. In a way, the Spirit only asks one question. In this state of immersion into matter, I call it pracritic immersion, the one question the Spirit has is, who am I? What am I? The Vicharya from Ramana Maharshi, a Capricorn initiate, obviously, he says it's the fastest way. Who am I? 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 Searching for that particular, the answer to that is the fastest way, he says. And Carl Jung, the great psychologist, called him the whitest point on a white space. Something about him was very, very pure and single-minded, and I think he taught a lot of people. I certainly enjoyed reading him years ago, and I think I got something definite in my orientation from simply the question, who am I? And because what it does is it peels away layer after layer of all the false identity, the things we think we are, but we're not really. We're not really those things. So that's that's our pursuit. Advaita Vedanta. Who am I? Ramana Maharshi, Shankaracharya, the same shortening of the name, the opposite pole of the Buddha, but the Buddha had it, of course, because but he was very, very practical. The Buddha knew the suchness, of course, and he could go through all the different levels of meditation, being at last a 6th degree Chohan, initiate. Not Siddhartha, not Gautama, not the prince that he used. No, that was not the Buddha. The Buddha was to Gautama as Christ was to Jesus, in my view. That's the only way it makes sense to me. Because the Buddha had already been, for 2,500 years, the head of the spiritual hierarchy. He's not going to go wandering in the woods looking for enlightenment. You know what I mean? He was already a master. But he had to achieve this 6th degree of Chohanship, which he did through a touch of the cosmic mental plane. And, that's no small thing. And of course, the Christ did that with the cosmic astral plane and a different aspect of divinity. That's right, and this is St. Francis, right? Okay, and this is Niskaradatta says, I am that. Yes, okay. And, but, St. Francis, I don't know where he picked it up, but he is said to have said exactly the same thing. He did not, without the first part, he says, what we're looking for is what's doing the looking. Think about that, And it's always impossible to get behind yourself. There's got to be a different way of experiencing what's doing the looking, what's doing the perceiving, what's doing the registering. And, basically we're going to discover that it all has a happy ending. Well, you can't have an ending, but universes end, and all the pain and the drama and the misery, self-inflicted by the universal logos upon itself, will vanish as illusory. And yet the law or the task of the infinite becoming apparently finite will have been fulfilled. Ignorance, where does it come from? The universal logos imposes ignorance upon itself. And that means that we, for the love of drama or whatever you want to call it, we impose limitation upon our infinite nature. And I, as a simple human being, at the moment, I'm not in a position to definitively say why this should be so. But, one thing I did come up with, that in order to be absolutely infinite, the great being has to be finite as well. So there have to be interludes of finitude. And being finite is what the universe is all about. And with limitation and finitude comes unhappiness and misery to the Great Spirit. And that's just how it is. And let's get a little closer to the source before we can speak definitively about these matters. Okay, friends, well, I think I hope I've answered everybody, or at least given you my impression. Nothing authoritative about it, I'm just giving you my impression. And glad that you're here, thinking about things that maybe we wouldn't normally be thinking about. We can do a whole lot of learning with the concrete mind in the Hall of Ignorance. Here it is. Pedal number 1, 2, and 3. You can, by the time you get to pedal number 3, you can be quite a smart human being. But until the dawning of the higher of the pairs of opposites, you are still, with relation to the higher power, in the Hall of Ignorance. And the higher power, of course, is multiple. It starts out as the angel of the presence underlying the soul on the higher mental plane, these three. And it goes on to the triad and monad and on and on and on until the higher power is what we really are, the origin and only actor in any universe forever. And that's a mouthful, and of course it's going to seem like a tremendous illusion to many, but I can't help that. That's how I see it at the moment, and I just have to state how I see it. And if it's helpful to anyone, then I am grateful. And if it's not helpful, then something like that will be at a certain time and at a certain place helpful. Because every one of us becomes totally, totally, totally enlightened in universal terms. Even the bad guys, eventually, because what are they essentially but the light, the love, and the power, which is the triplicity of any universe. All right, not to go on, but we'll continue. And remember, in terms of studying the detail of things, Friday night, we have our Cosmic Fire Bash. We'll be working on that. And meanwhile, Tuya and I will be on the morning schedule. So we will have the recommended meditation of the Tibetan here, GMT, in the morning at 6 a.m. in the morning. And then at 6 p.m., we'll have the science of triangles, dealing more with the astrological and the rheological foundation of the science of triangles. And remember, he said it's a work which must go on. Now, DK is not given to exaggeration, so that if he says it must go on, then it must go on. And if we know something about it, as we do, we have a big responsibility to make sure that it goes on, continues, okay? It can be of more help than we know, and in this year of the new group of world servers, with different groups having their 7-day festival together, we have one here in Finland, I think in Upper New York. There's one there with Steve Nation and some members of the Arcane School group, and elsewhere, South America, I don't know. Different groups will get together for 7 days, and they'll be in touch with each other, but working behind the scenes, because we have some dire things going on in the world of illusion, and we have to help to solve those things, We have to do that because we know something. And when you know something like that, you have a big responsibility, okay? So, let's just sound the great invocation together. And then call it a day or night or whatever it is. From the point of light, within the mind of God, let light stream forth into the minds of men. Let light descend on earth. From the point of love, within the heart of God, let love stream forth into the hearts of men. May Christ return to earth. From the center where the will of God is known, let purpose guide the little wills of men, the purpose which the masters know and serve. From the center which we call the race of men, let the plan of love and light work out, and may it seal the door where evil dwells. Let light and love and power restore the plan on earth. And a very old prayer has been added here by Carson's, I try to say that 108 times. What I know is Om Bhur Bhuvasva Tat Savitur Varenyam Bargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Na Prachodayat Om. And there are some things in here that well, some things that are the same. And basically that one is the Gayatri, the great prayer. And this one looks even more extensive. So sometime maybe Karsten just, to Shiva. Yeah, okay, good. Translate it for us, or the translation that you have, it would be good. Be good to know. Appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, everybody, so we wish you the best, and tomorrow morning, at least morning here, we have the triangles meditation, and then at night, science of triangles, and then on we go with the reappearance of the Christ and the glamour work and the cosmic fire read through, take 50 years, and the work on the soul of nations on Saturday, and the work for attracting money for hierarchical purposes on Sunday. So very happy to have you here, appreciative, and you have a nice day or night or whatever is being presented to you by the rotation of the Earth on its axis. We'll see you now, and lots of love and many blessings from Tuya and me and the whole team, and Joe and BL and Michael and all everybody who's working to bring these webinars to you. So